everyone. I'm Cassandra Eve, whole woman astrologer, facilitator and author of Sacred Pathways, Discovering the Divine Feminine Archetypes in You. This is the first in a series of video conversations, and we're looking at the Divine Feminine Archetypes as I portray them within my book. And today with me is Andrea Michelle Kennedy of Precious Human Birth. I just simply love that name. And Andrea Michelle is based in Seattle in the US. So welcome, Andrea Michelle.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. It is sincerely a pleasure to be here with you.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I'm really inspired and excited to see where our conversation goes today. And today we're exploring the archetype of Venus, who's traditionally known as the goddess of love. I describe her in my book as the divine feminine at our core, and that's the divine feminine at our core in both men and women. But we'll speak more about Venus in a moment. First, kind of big picture. I'm feeling let's explore the big picture and what astrology actually is in the way I see it and my experience of it, in the way that you see it in your experience of it. And I've been an astrologer for more than 30 years now. And it came into my life when my life was literally falling apart. And it was one of those synchronous moments when you just meet somebody in a cafe and start having a chat, and all of a sudden the whole universe opens up. It was quite incredible. Long story short, I had my birth chart done and was just simply astounded at what I could see about the patterns in my humanness and what was happening in the process that I was in at that time of everything falling apart was really a birth. It was a death and a birth. And the astrology helped me to understand the process of that. So very quickly I decided I wanted to train, become an astrologer. It led me into all different kinds of other healing modalities and into my spirituality and into spiritual community, which was not based around astrology at all, but it was like a door opened into so much more. And really, to bring it back to Venus, it taught me, or I discovered through astrology, that I'm the center of my life, whereas actually prior to that, I hadn't been. And so when everything fell apart, it was like I'd lost my center. So I discovered through astrology that I am the center of that wheel that is my life. And the one thing I love about it is that you meet some really amazing people, very interesting people, and you never stop learning. It's like the universe, you know, constantly expanding. So how about you? How did you come to astrology, and what does it mean to you?
How did I come to astrology? That's a wonderful question. For me, it was, I used to actually sit and do plant medicine for a number of years. And it was somehow when I was doing plant medicine, astrology started to come up for me, just seemingly out of the blue. I would say in 2009. And I just dabbled here and there. I was learning and buying books and just whoever was interesting to me. And then it wasn't until I met Adam Gainsbourg, who we both know, of Soul Sign, that my foray into astrology really deepened. Now, to take a step back, the same year that I met Adam, I actually went down to the jungle of Peru to do a very serious, it's called a dieta, for 2 months. And unbeknownst to me at the time, that was when Venus was crossing the face of the sun in her last Gemini cycle. And so I was energetically wide open in receiving the imprints of Venus And where she was in her conjunction, the sun was right on my natal Lilith and progressed moon. So I found that out later on. So that awakened in me a real, a deepening of astrology into literally like a three-dimensional picture, because I've since learned from Adam about planetary phases and what an important dimension they add to astrology, because they literally help us access not only the spatial relationship between other planets, between two planets, but also from the perspective of Earth, from our perspective, from the perspective of our bodies. So it really adds a juiciness, which is perfectly Venusian, right? A different relationship, which is also Venusian, to the equation of the chart. It doesn't supplant the chart, the 2D chart at all, but it helps to inform. And so my astrology really took off from there. Yeah, because the embodiment of astrology, like not just astrology for more information, which is very, very cool and interesting, but how does it serve in our embodiment, in our flowering into more of who we are and living it in the world? That is what intrigues me about astrology. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I would say at that awakening point for me, that was what it was like everything turned outside in, and the journey started to deepen in an interior way that then could express externally in a more centered way. You know, it really became about living what I was learning through the astrology, and that's what informs all my work with astrology. I mean, what use is it knowing where the planets are if they're not applicable to the way that you live more consciously? Right. And that's what really thrills me about astrology, is that it's such a powerful guide to how this unique individual here is equipped, is being mapped, if you like, by the universe to live in a unique way, yet within that consciousness that is oneness. It's just incredible, really incredible. So Venus is traditionally known as the goddess of love. Yeah. And we know her in our sky as, if we do, as the morning star and the evening star. She has different phases, rises and sets, just like the sun and the moon. And we will explore that a little more, a bit further into our conversation. But I'd like to first have a look at, you know, what actually is Venus? What does she represent in us and to us and as a guide to us? So I've spoken about her as the core of the divine feminine in ourselves, and traditionally known as the goddess of love, but also she represents, you know, how we enjoy life, how we feel good, the abundance of life, our relationships, and not just the relationships of people, but the relationships between all things. And the unity of all things, perhaps, as well, if we take it even further. And I'd like to just read a couple of pieces from my book that kind of expand on that a little, and then we'll see where that goes. And I'm going to start with the more traditional view of Venus, which is Venus in partnership, Venus in relationship and in sexuality. And there's a poem that I wrote many years ago when I just found poems. I never had an intention to write any, they just started to pour through. And that process in itself is very Venusian. It's like that we are, when open, another Venusian word, a vessel, you know, and can be a vessel for that process of creativity, however it looks, whether it's the creation of a baby or a poem. So that's where I'm going to start, is with the poem. There's an ebb and a flow tonight I feel her pulsing. The mysterious urge, rhythm of life, sensating, vibrating, pulsating me. Venus, rising in my belly. Galaxies pouring from my breasts, tide of sensuality rising. The calling of intensity running in my blood, my body, every cell tingling, mingling earth with universe, colliding stars, roaring through infinity with the scream of ecstasy. It's all inside this passionate union of life. It's in me, beyond me, through me, he and she entwined in cosmic fusion, exploring, exploding, imploding ecstasy. It's here, from fingertips to warm, moist inner cave. With each breath, I feel her rising and falling, calling her emptiness, yet fullness, her rhythmic sensation, running wild through his silence. I am the lover and his breath tonight. I am beloved. I am loved. I am earth, moon, sun, love tonight. And then another picture altogether. The Venus archetype represents our desire and capacity for love. That's what I've just been sharing. She's about how and who, even what we love. She represents what is deeply of value to us, along with the expression of our creative potential and the enjoyment of true fulfillment. In exploring our capacity for relating and experiencing love, we may recognize that our longing for love is the fuel that grows us. This longing, when we are brave enough to follow it, takes us beyond ourselves. It shatters our old boundaries and offers us the opportunity to become more of who we are at core, beyond our self-beliefs and structures. Venus, as the archetype of love, offers us her hand and leads us into the unknown. Her calling is threefold. Her magnetic nature expresses through the primal urge of sexuality to experience union and fulfillment, with its potential to create new life in the form of a child. It is known through the calling of love to fully express the heart in intimacy. It reveals itself also through the desire to express or create forms of beauty and artistry. Venus calls us to fully give and receive, to express, to know and enjoy life's natural abundance. I find it interesting also that Venus rules two signs, the sign of Libra and the sign of Taurus. So we have that calling to relate, that calling of one and another, and also the connection to nature, to the body, to the physicality of life, to our senses and our appetites and our sensuality. So how's your encounter with Venus? What do you see her as?
She's, first of all, that poem, whew, Cassandra, I love it. It's absolutely gorgeous. I'd forgotten that when I read The Sacred Pathways originally.
Thank you.
All your poetry. Well, what's interesting, what you just brought up about Venus being the ruler of Taurus and Libra, in the chart wheel, they are in what's called an inconjunct or a quincunx relationship, which is actually the aspect of no relationship, which is right?
Irritation.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's number 5 in there, right?
Yeah.
And we think about the Venus rose, you know, the 5 different cycles that are all within an 8-year period that alternate, and how it creates this beautiful rose, the relationship between Venus and the Earth, like the sacred geometry. It's 5 is a very creative number, right? And so Venus, it's like the impulse, as you were sharing, is to relate, is to form a relationship where there is none previously. One of the things I love the way Adam speaks about Libra is it's seeking out differences to find common ground, which I just love, right?
Yeah.
And speaks to her exaltation in Pisces, right? Which is also, you know, all about oneness and whatnot. But in Taurus, the fact that there's seemingly a relationship that's at odds, you know, how could we be in relationship with ourselves so intimately and our resources, right? Which is the Taurus, the sensuality of being and discovering in my environment what I don't have yet that I need.
Yeah.
The immediate relationship for survival, right? And then yet bringing out, having the capacity to also seek out others to, in an immature way, to complete us when we don't have a proper relationship with our resources, or in a more mature fashion to really, again, seek out differences in order to find that common ground. So there's always a constant having to reflect. It's like she introduces the idea of again, finding relationship, seeking out relationship where there previously hadn't been one. You know, we can, one of the shadow elements of Taurus is only wanting to be with people that are like-minded, right? That share our values, that, you know, where we know what's coming. We know what they have to offer. There isn't much more that we need from them. And so the Libra quality of Venus, the simultaneous wanting to seek out in its shadow element can be just, again, for the sake of completing me for what I don't have.
Yeah.
You can get into the Scorpio realm, of course, with the Taurus Scorpio polarity. But it's, as you beautifully put, when you discovered astrology and it brought you into more of like your inner world and how much your inner world had previously unconsciously reflected how you viewed the outer world. And that shift to more ownership, more sovereignty around, okay, I know this about me now. I also know that this is not, I know how I'm living this now and how I'd like to live it, how I want to grow into more of these qualities and work on these other qualities. It's this beautiful, really always returning to coming back here, because she's an inner planet first and foremost, right?
Yeah.
And we tend to really be hyper aware of our environment, hyper aware of other people to the detriment of what's happening here. And this is not a selfish, like me above or before other people. It's more of a boundary. It's creating a safe, secure space within ourselves from which then to relate to other people. And it's that constant ebb and flow, inward, inner and outer, that is the Venus conundrum and part of the desire, feels like part of the desire nature.
Yeah, amazing. How when you were sharing, it was kind of pinging off so many insights in me in different ways around Venus and the Taurus and the Libra. And I was seeing, as you know, Taurus is more our relationship with ourself and our physicality and our stuff, if you like, our resources, and can be a place of comfort and security. But then you have that, as you were saying, the 5 relationship that quincunx with the Libra, and Libra is about other, not so comfortable. It's that more creative place of where growth is possible through the difference, and how we we can navigate backwards and forwards between the two in terms of coming back to center, coming back to our own heart, our own relationship with ourselves,
Yeah.
and then explore that, let go in that. Although Taurans aren't necessarily, the sign isn't necessarily known as a sign of letting go, but it is a sign of gestation. You know, that's what I see in terms of the Taurian energy. It's where we hold and we gestate. You know, like the seeds in the ground at this time of year in spring, and very fertile. Yeah, very fertile in its energy, and then go out again once more to meet the difference of relationship with other, whatever that other is, because Libra is that sign of the balance, the scales, myself and other, or this and that. And how do the two meet? Where do they not meet? How do they relate? How do they connect? And I recall having this real awareness around the scales as balance, and this idea that I had of that being a static. But of course it's not. You know, it's the balance is constantly like this, and where we're challenged perhaps is when it moves too much that way. Exactly. Too much that way in terms of towards oneself or away from oneself. So that dynamic between the Taurus and Libra, the Venus ruled signs, I was seeing a completely different picture of that through your sharing. So thank you for that.
I love it. Thank you, Cassandra. Well, you're right. And oftentimes people with a lot of Libra need to go to extremes to learn, right? It's that imbalance that you were sharing.
Yeah.
And the you also brought so beautifully in the heart, which is really the only place where we can where both and can live, where we can be very intimate with ourselves and also at the same time be connected with other people. It's that paradox, the place of the inner creativity. And what is creativity if it's not a merging of opposites, right? It's where like waves come crashing and create something new. It's the 1 + 1 = 3, right?
Yeah.
So it's that tension, like you say, that balance between self and other. It's a lifetime's work, but it's a constant. There's never any stasis, right? Although we can fall toward the Taurian side, want to say, okay, this is it. This is what I got. I'm good here, you know. But then there's always something coming up. That's the attachment, right? Something always shows up, a person or a situation in our life to bring that up and to help us face where we're stuck. Or
absolutely, especially in these changing, some would say challenging times, that all our attachments are challenged in terms of any form of external security. I would say is nowhere to be found really at the moment. It's only in there and in that relationship to oneself that then can respond to whatever appears on the stage of life. So more recently, as you know, how we met was through Adam Gainsbourg's work with the Venus cycles, and I've been immersed in that for the last few years and really, really learning so much. And I mean, I know you've been working with Adam for quite a while and you have a lot more knowledge and understanding of the cycles than I do. So would you share something about the cycles, and particularly where we're at the moment in I know we're in the immersion phase of Venus moving towards the sun, behind the sun, disappearing from our Earth, and then she will put on her evening star dress and reappear in May. So can you share more about the cycles and particularly their relevance to us in our world now, in our changing world?
I love that. Thank you. It's a great, great question. Yes, Adam Gainsbourg, through his book, The Light of Venus, which came out in 2012, actually, after years and years of his own personal observation, getting up, watching Venus in the sky, much like our ancient astronomers, astrologers in Babylonia, Mesopotamia, the Maya. I mean, so many cultures really, really because of her brightness and the change of Venus, particularly, they seem to like to track Venus among other planets. But there is something enormously powerful about forming a direct relationship with these planets, especially our sister planet, Venus and Mars, the masculine complement to the feminine. And again, because the phases, the way Adam put them together, there are 13 phases, which of course is the number of the goddess, although Mars has 13 phases too, but I love that number. It's the Maya used the number 13 as kind of another zero, like the empty space between things. So it was, which is fantastic because it allows for the space for death and destruction and creation to come. So the Venus cycle maps Venus by the sky factors such as Earth proximity. How close at any time is Venus to the Earth when we're seeing her? Is she moving apparently backwards or retrograde motion for us? The implications of that. Is she moving fast for her relative speed, or is she moving more slowly? And what is the trend? Is she moving fast and slowing? Is she moving fast and picking up speed?
Mm-hmm.
And whether she's visible at birth in the morning, or whether she's visible in the evening, or whether she's completely invisible when we were born. All these different things really create like a, what I call like a more of a sacred geometry. It fleshes it out, the spatial relationship of Venus to the Earth, and not just her relationship with the sun. Although it maps the elongation and where she is and the distance of Venus to the sun at any one point, it's from the perspective of Earth. And that's the important thing, right? So there's a three-way relationship happening here. So right now, this cycle began in June of 2020, last year. It's going to go until January of 2022. The Venus cycles are approximately 19 months or 584 days. And again, broken out into 13 different phases of unequal length. And the immersion phase that began just a couple weeks ago and last about 50 days is where Venus is, she was rising before the sun as a morning star. And in this prior phase, surrendering and discovery, where she was disappearing each morning or lower and lower on the horizon, getting dimmer and dimmer and dimmer from our perspective. If we were to be watching the sunrise or before sunrise, we would have seen Venus. So she's distancing from Earth and she's moving to the other side of the sun from us. So she is going to be, she's progressing further and further away from Earth to the point where she's the furthest from Earth. So at her next conjunction with the sun, she'll be on the opposite side of the Earth. The sun will be in between Venus and the Earth. And without, I mean, we could spend hours and hours talking about the significations of all this, which anybody who works with the phases can go into at a different time, and something that I work with in my clients. But right now, collectively, we are in the Venus-Gemini cycle, which means the Gemini was the sign in which Venus first became visible after her interior conjunction with the sun, when she was retrograde and closest to Earth. The way Adam maps the Venus cycle, it begins when Venus is apparently moving backwards in our skies, and she is in between Earth and the sun. So it's more of the morning star period is more of her Tauresian element, and the evening star is more of a Libran element, because it's more of an the morning star phase is an I, me, mine orientation, which can be very, very healthy. And the evening star phase is an us, we, them orientation. So right now in immersion, she is continuing to surrender and really become intimate with loss. Loss as a necessary part of shedding. All that we've accumulated in the morning star period that is really not who we are. It can be the superficialities, because Venus can be known as being very superficial too in her shadow element. It's all about relating or creating a false sense of security or harmony, just not to rock the boat, to stir up anything that's underneath, right? So anything that we've taken on or experimented with that is no longer ours, or where we can allow for a cauldron to experience what we have learned or how we've related in the first half of the cycle, is or is not part of us. It's not like it's all about shedding. It's really about allowing for a space to really not know, to be in that liminal space of not relating the way we are accustomed to, not the habitual ways of relating, in order to discover a deeper relating, to really come back to what is important, to bring consciousness, the sun, to our habits and patterns and old tracks that we're running of survival, and where we haven't been true to ourselves for the sake of just staying where we are without really any kind of growth. So as she's moving away from Earth and heading more closer to, from our perspective, the sun, it's illuminating the dark spaces. It's illuminating the places where we have been on the surface and not really, and ignored our depths. Like you beautifully said, it was like your reading that you received really changed your orientation, which was necessary for you. Some of us are more Libran in the way we are wired and need to find more of our Taurus. Some of us are more Tauresian and need to find more of our Libra. And there's always like, nobody is one way or another, but we all have both of those aspects of Venus in us. So it's really the light of consciousness, the sun, that is not simply shining for us, but shining for everyone. It really, really puts a perspective. It draws us out of our limited way of relating. Because Venus is the planet of relationship. When she's not visible anymore, it's almost like one of the ways Adam describes the immersion phase is like all of our go-to ways of relating suddenly become like questionable or questioned. Like we can't rely necessarily on people the way we thought we could, or we discover that we have to take inventory of our resources, or like all these very Venusian ways in which we are challenged to find where we've insisted on staying a certain way at the expense of finding more and more of our depth and going further and further toward the shadow elements, which the sun exposes very, very gently to bring us into more of our gifts, honestly. And to find that place, again, that center point of our hearts, which can take us out of an either or paradigm into a both and. And that is really part of this immersion heading toward transmutation, which is the uniquely feminine mode of transformation, which I won't go into here for time, but collectively, essentially, we are all in this place of deeply questioning our values, deeply questioning our relationships, and all of this in service to coming more fully into our Gemini feminine and the signs through which she travels in the underworld, from the time she became invisible to the time she reappears as in the rebirth phase. In May, she'll have traveled through Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, and come out back in Gemini. But it's going to be a very different Venus coming out and being visible in the evening sky in the sign of Gemini.
Yeah.
Than the Venus that began her phase in the sign of Gemini. It's a completely different spatial relationship. So the lens through which we see the sign consciousness of Gemini is different when we take into account the phase in which a planet is in. It's something that I would encourage anybody listening to really take time. If you're in a place where you can't see the horizon very well, or you can't see the planets, I mean, she's invisible now anyway, but just to take a moment and to picture the planet Venus disappearing from the morning sky, being gone, what that might feel like, to have our feminine, to have to learn to rely solely on what the feminine is within us, rather than how it's being reflected to us from the outer world. And then what it would be like for her to come back around from the farthest point on the opposite side of the sun, back toward the earth. There's a real beautiful, visceral feeling, almost in my experience, like a longing or a sadness. Like she really draws us out into our longing in this in the immersion and the transmutation phase. So any fear that we have of change or losing what we feel like we have, that we really want to hold on to, this is a beautiful time and a good reminder. Where's our longing? That's a really good way of taking the energy of what we seem to be losing track of, losing sight of. This is all in service to letting go of what we think we wanted and being willing and courageous to step into an unknown space of discovering it. And longing is a beautiful way. Another way of, it's like another form of desire, like a longing for. Where is our longing? To really, really dive into where our longing is. I hope that wasn't too convoluted or.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I was saying how that the cycle in its entirety is that like the process of the seasons. It's that birthing and that filling up, and then inevitably the emptying out of what has served its purpose or is not for us, but we want it, or whatever it is. The inevitable emptying out and the journey through autumn and winter, that brings us once more to a new spring, where if we've journeyed well, as the saying goes, then we can be filled again. And it's our longing, a very Venusian word again, that magnetizes what we truly desire in the deepest place. Not what we think we want, but what we truly desire, what can truly deeply fulfill us. Exactly. That sometimes we can't even put into words, but we can feel.
Yes. And that's feeling is precisely, Cassandra. That is a very Venusian aspect of our being. It's the feminine feeling. And sometimes what we attract might not be what we think we want.
Yeah.
But to learn to trust a new way.
Yeah.
I mean, not to just automatically trust everything that's showing up, but just to be open to, and especially in the Gemini Venus cycle, what is coming. Like to really, really, to test it out, to not say no right away if it's not familiar, to really, really explore, to play, to be curious and inquisitive about it, and not try to glom onto or attach to anything, which is a Venusian thing too, right away, as a false safety. This is really this one. It's like over 100 days that Venus is invisible to us. This is the really great opportunity to allow an inner exploration.
Yeah,
Really, really.
because she's invisible and we can't rely on that external reflection
Exactly.
of her. And when you look at where our world is at the moment, you know, that's exactly what's happening in
Right.
terms of, you know, change has always been the only certainty, but right now more and more human beings are connecting to the reality of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that the process of change is the only certainty.
What's beneath the surface, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're out of time.
And
So wonderful to speak to you. I've really enjoyed it.
oh,
Thank you
wow, me
so
too.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your creative input and many blessings. And long may the journey with Venus continue to expand and grow as we connect with her more deeply.
Cassandra, I am so grateful for your work and what you're doing and what you're bringing forward for people. It's inspiring, and especially having you in the Venus circle is like a tremendous, tremendous blessing. The wisdom that you carry, the embodied wisdom that you carry, and that it is infused into sacred pathways.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.